Greetings. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host, and this is Community Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an outstanding guest with us this evening, Michael Nerheim, Lake County State's Attorney, has volunteered his time to be with us to share with us an update on the mission and goals of the State's Attorney's Office. Greetings, Attorney Nerheim.
Greetings. How are you, Doctor?
We're very happy to have you again. This is not your first time on Community Forum, and I really appreciate literally you taking time for your busy schedule to come down to update Lake County about the mission and goals of the State's Attorney's Office. Lake County is approximately about 850,000 people that you represent, but we hope that the ones that are listening will give their friends and relatives a call. We're on at Channel 17 every Thursday at 7 p.m. And we wish you would tune in. A couple of weeks ago, we had the Lake County Coroner on. Mr. Cooper did a fantastic job letting people know about some things that they hadn't thought about.
Sure.
in the coroner's office. But tell us about Michael Nerheim. First of all, about your personal and professional background for those that don't know.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me back on, Dr. Brooks. It's always a pleasure to be on your show. I know I've been on a few times, and any chance I have to come out and kind of educate the community about what's going on in our office, I'm always happy to do it. So, I was born and raised in Waukegan, and which is kind of neat because it's really a pleasure for me to work in the community that I grew up in. My office is in downtown Waukegan, and it's important for me to be part of the community that we all live in. So my professional background, I went to law school in Chicago at John Marshall Law School, and commuted to and from Chicago from Waukegan every day, and it was good. I studied on the train there and back, so really enjoyed that experience going to law school. And prior to that, and during that, I would do summer internships at the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. And in doing those internships, I did 5 summers in a row, college and law school. But it gave me an opportunity to learn all the different parts of the State's Attorney's Office, to meet the people, and to really get kind of a deep dive into what it's like to really be a prosecutor. And when I graduated, I knew that's the job I wanted to try to get, and I was lucky enough to be hired as an assistant state's attorney in 1999, right after graduating law school. I worked in the state's attorney's office for a number of years after that in the different divisions of the office, handling all different types of cases, from traffic tickets to murder and everything in between. And then after a period of time doing that, I decided I wanted a different challenge, and I wanted to try to help people in a different capacity. So I left the office and went into private practice in Waukegan as a criminal defense attorney primarily. We did some civil work and things like that, but most of my practice was in criminal defense. And I really enjoyed that experience because it allowed me the opportunity to work criminal law from a different side, to help people in a different way that you're able to help them as a prosecutor. Gave me perspective that I think is important for a prosecutor to have, having represented people charged with crimes and both private clients. I also had I was assigned indigent clients by the court, so I represented people that had been assigned to the public defender, but because of a conflict, the court would appoint me. So being on both sides of the law was both a challenge and also just great experience for me to have. And then I ran for this position in 2012, was fortunate enough to win, and here I am. So I've been kind of on both sides of the law as a criminal attorney, and I absolutely love what I do now. It gives me an opportunity to really, in a very powerful sense, serve my community, all of Lake County, not just Waukegan, but all of Lake County, and I absolutely love it.
Well, tell us about Waukegan, though. You mentioned Waukegan. Is it one of the largest cities in the county.
It is. So Lake County is about 730,000 roughly, depending, and we'll have a new census coming out here pretty soon, so we'll get some different numbers. But
I kind of elevated with the 8.
And you never know. It could certainly be. I know we're the third biggest county in Illinois, so it goes Cook, DuPage is a little bit bigger than us, then Lake, then Kane is a little bit smaller than us, and then it kind of goes down from there. But Waukegan is definitely the county seat. It's a big city. It's an important city. Anything we're trying to do county-wide, a lot of things happen in Waukegan. So it's a really important piece of what we're trying to do throughout the county. And we're lucky to have great people that are part of Waukegan government that we can work with. The chief of police in Waukegan is a wonderful guy, and it's a good department that we're able to do a lot of good with.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the chief of police. He volunteered to. I mentioned about people volunteering to be on the program, but I asked him when he was overjoyed to be on.
He's great,
and he did a very good job.
He talks more than I do almost, which is a challenge. But he's a really nice person, big-hearted person. Yeah. He really cares. He has great experience too as a police officer, and when we're trying to do some of the things that we'll talk about in the show, but some of the outside-the-box programs like the Away Out program or some of the diversion work that we're trying to do, he's always been 100% on board with those things. So
now, the overall mission of the Lake County State's Attorney's Office.
Yeah, I know you don't like short answers, but it's 2 words: seek justice. That's our mission. I mean, we have a mission statement and all that, like most organizations, but really, it's 2 words, and that's to seek justice. And it's a short answer, but it's also more of a complex answer than just those 2 words, because justice is different in every case. But we really preach with everybody that works in the office that your job, it's not to go out and get convictions and send everybody to jail or prison. It's to do the right thing, and whatever justice means in that particular case, based on all the different facts and the law that applies, that's our job, is to seek justice. And we represent the people of Lake County in cases involving both criminal cases, and also we represent county government in civil cases as well.
I was thinking of seeking justice. The underprivileged, for example, they may have a different interpretation of seeking justice.
Sure.
So you may want to elaborate on that.
I think there's been communities, certainly communities of color, that throughout the years have been disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system, not here or just here, but really all over the country. And those are bridges that have to be rebuilt. And that's why I've tried very hard to build programs in Lake County to make sure that everybody knows that our system it's there for everybody, and the law is, that's every statute you see of the scales of justice. There's a blindfold there, and it's there for a reason. So we have to make sure that the law applies equally to everybody, and not only is the truth there, but also the reality and the perception is there. We have to mix the perception and the reality, because, the reality may actually be that. I know for a fact that the perception in a lot of communities is not there yet. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in that regard.
And we might move down a little bit. You talked to me a lot on the last program about ways that you are trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And some of the ways, I think the programs you mentioned about a Way Out program, is it too late to people to use that program once they've been convicted?
No. In fact, I'll kind of back up and talk about what the Way Out program is. And it's a program that we worked through the Lake County Opioid Initiative that I've been very involved in to bring to Lake County and really build this program. Worked very hard with Chief Gunther from the Mundelein Police Department, who is really kind of the quarterback behind getting this program up and running. Another wonderful person in law enforcement that should be on your show at some point. You love him, but
we'll have you.
I know
be
where
the
to find him,
coordinator.
so I'll get him. But the idea behind that program was in trying to get to people that are struggling with addiction. How can we get those people access to help? Because and even going back a little bit further, as you know, we have wonderful programs in our court system, like drug court, veterans court, mental health court. We have a new opiate diversion court. We have alternative prosecution program, which is another diversion program aimed at allowing people the opportunity to avoid a conviction, even for felony cases. So there's all kinds of great programs that the goal of those programs are to help get people treatment and out of the criminal justice system. And they're great programs. But you got to get arrested before you can get access to those programs, right? Yeah. So the way the A Way Out program works is, it recognizes that people that struggle with addiction, whether it's alcohol, pills, meth, cocaine, heroin, whatever the drug is, those people usually go through some period of where they sort of wake up at 2 in the morning and decide, I don't want to live this way anymore. I'd like to get some help. I want help. I'm done. But those people don't know where to go, and especially when that window is at 2 or 3 in the morning. So the Way Out simply recognizes that happens and then seeks to provide a way for people to get access to treatment regardless of the day, a week, regardless of the time, and to make it as easy as possible for people to access treatment. So the way it works mechanically is those people can walk into a police department, again, any time of the day or night, simply say, hey, I need some help, and help me out. If they have drugs or paraphernalia on them, they can turn that over to the police. They're not arrested, and the police will help route those people into treatment. A process begins where the health department, the Lake County Health Department, which is another wonderful partner of ours, will work with the police, work with that person to identify what that person's treatment needs are. And then they begin a process of trying to find available treatment space for that person, whether it's inpatient or outpatient treatment. Okay. And then the police will then, their biggest role at that point is to transport that person to whatever treatment facility is available. And that may be in Lake Villa, it may be in Chicago, or it may be even further away. But that's the commitment that police officers have been making, is to transport those people into treatment. And we're right around 600 people so far that have come into that program. Wow. And if they have prior felony conviction or something like that, that doesn't matter. It's a voluntary program. If they walk in and ask for help, the police will help them. It's voluntary also in the sense that people can come in and change their mind and decide, I don't want to do this, and they can leave. And that's okay, because what we found is when most of those people do leave, they come back when they've decided that they're ready for treatment.
Now, is that a strenuous program, or?
It depends on what the person's treatment needs are. So what we found interestingly is the majority of people that come into the program, and again, it sort of makes sense because this population of people are people that a lot of them have been through treatment before. They've sort of hit bottom. They've decided on their own they want help. So this isn't a population of people where you're saying, hey, you need to go to treatment or you're going to go to jail. And you're trying to force people to want it. Whereas this population of people, they've decided on their own that they want help. Okay. So most of those people come in, interestingly, and are asking for pretty high level of treatment. They're asking for inpatient treatment. And that becomes an issue in terms of our capacity to actually provide that treatment, because the scary thing for me is Lake County. In Lake County, we're one of the most resource-rich counties in the country in terms of the amount, and certainly in the state of Illinois, in terms of the amount of treatment resources we have available to us. But even here, we struggle. We're really at capacity in terms of the amount of treatment space we have for people. Wow. And what we don't want to do is have somebody come into the program and say, okay, help me. I give up, help me, and then we don't have a place to send them. So I spend a lot of my time lobbying for increased treatment capacity, not only here but around the country, because that's, in my opinion, the only way we're going to get ourselves out of this opioid epidemic that we're in the middle of is more treatment for people.
Since we have such a diverse population here in Lake County, one of the greatest, is it limited to a certain group of the population?
No, it's open to anybody. And in fact, it's also not limited to Lake County residents. So we'll take people from anywhere. In fact, we've had people drive from states like Tennessee, all the way up to Lake County because they heard about the program. We've had people come down from Wisconsin. We've had people come from neighboring counties. And certainly any community within Lake County has been covered. So, it's important to us to make it open to anybody regardless of where they're from, regardless of, their financial situation. We want people to be able to get treatment because, the reality is if you have commercial insurance, it's easy to find treatment.
Okay.
If you don't have insurance or if you're underinsured, it's much more difficult. So we want to be able to help people navigate that, and that's where our health department has been really amazing in finding treatment for people that might not otherwise have the ability to pay for it, because ability to pay should never be a roadblock when it comes to treatment. If somebody's willing to step forward and ask for help, we need to make sure we get it for them.
Yeah. You have challenging experiences every day. In other words, this is not a 9-to-5 job in the state's attorney's office, then, right?
No, it's not. My wife would tell you that. But again, it's a job that I love, and anybody that does this job, you have to love it, and you have to be committed to it, because it's not, by its nature, it's not a 9-to-5 gig, and that's okay. I mean, I'm still one of those people that looks forward to going to work. I love what I do, and even if it's a weekend or a late night, it's just, it is what it is. But the only downside of that is sometimes you miss family obligations that or you miss time away from your kids' sporting events or things like that can be a challenge. But I'm usually able to get to most things. So
I know in several of the events, I know you have your wife and your family with you. You know, which shows how much support they give you.
They do give me a lot. I couldn't do it without them. And sometimes I bring them with me to that stuff because it's the only time we get to see each other. But it's a family thing we're all doing together, and it's good for them. Frankly, it's great for my kids to be able to go all over Lake County, to go to all different types of events and to meet and see all different types of people. It gives them exposure to things that most kids don't get exposure to, both good and bad. And but to your point, my wife's a saint. I couldn't do this without her support.
Okay. Right. Yeah. I can relate to you because my wife's the same way.
Your wife's the same too. I know your wife, and I would second that.
Right. Now you also have many relationships, and I got a few here. The mayors of cities you have to have relationship with, or you don't have to, but you do. County officials and local citizens even, and I mentioned, I think we were on the radio, the late Mary Lacy. She felt that you were her private attorney. She said, you don't bother me, I'll contact Michael Nerheim, the state's attorney, go to the state's attorney's office. But you have many relationships, right? You have to, and life's about relationships, really. I mean, this is a people business we're in, and if you want to get things done, you have to be able to work with people. And, that's just the nature of being able to be effective. And I enjoy working with people. This job's given me the opportunity to work with a lot of different types of people. And Dr. Lacy was, you mentioned her. She was a great woman, a dear friend of mine. Hated, I'm really sorry we're all sorry to lose her. But, she was somebody that was not afraid to call me if she needed something or she felt something needed to be done in her community. And I love that about her. If she needed the police, she would call the chief. Okay. If she needed something going on, there was some issue she had a concern about, she'd call me directly. If she wanted to do a parade and give out toys and, turkeys to kids at the jail over Christmas, let's just get this done. And she was able to do things. And I've seen you at her home too. She invited you to dinner.
I've been to her house. And, she just had a huge heart and really cared about the community. And I know we all miss her.
Oh yeah, so definitely. So, well, tell us about your office there. What goes on in the state's attorney's office? I know you invited me one time and took me on a tour. But detail. What detail goes?
It's part of the fun of it because it's different every day. So we're 142 people in the office and 3 dogs. We have 3 dogs on staff, which I always like to mention. Okay. Usually I have one of them with me here. I didn't bring one this time, but
Yeah, right.
The dogs are
Mitch or someone.
Mitch. Yeah,
yeah,
yep, Mitch.
Right.
So we have Mitch and Hitch. They're both facility dogs. Their job is to help victims that we're dealing with, to help them feel a little bit less stressed out and a little bit less anxious. Not only victims, but family members of victims, and frankly us as well. They help reduce the stress that we encounter every day. So they're great. They're a great part of our staff, and really proud to have them. Our other dog, Browser, is an electronic detection dog. He's more of a kind of law enforcement type dog. We use him in our cyber unit. He can sense electronic devices, so thumb drives, hard drives, really anything with a chip in it, cell phones. If somebody were to hide something on a thumb drive and then hide that thumb drive, he could go in and find it.
Wow.
So he's been a huge help. And then, in terms of the people in the office, the rest of us, we're criminal and civil. So the civil side of the fence represents Lake County. So you can think of them as sort of the law firm, if you will, that represents Lake County and the interests of Lake County and all the elected officials in Lake County. On the criminal side, we prosecute state level crime that occurs within Lake County. So state level could be anything from speeding to murder and anything in between. And those crimes are all prosecuted by my staff, with the exception of traffic offenses and misdemeanor DUI offenses. Most municipalities also have a private attorney that works on a contract with that village through our authority, just because of the number of cases. So for example, if there was a DUI in Gurnee, that would be prosecuted by the Gurnee village prosecutor. If there was a felony DUI in Gurnee, that would be prosecuted by my office. So it gets a little confusing, but and then we do all the DUIs if it's a state police case, Lake County Sheriff, Waukegan Police, and a couple other smaller municipalities. But most of the DUI prosecution, which is a big part of what goes on in the courthouse, those are being prosecuted by municipal prosecutors. And then our office on the criminal side is broken up into different divisions. So you have the traffic and misdemeanor division, which is where people typically start handling the DUI cases, the high-level traffic cases, and all the different types of misdemeanor offenses. We have a domestic violence unit, which, as the name would denote, handles the domestic violence cases, both felony and misdemeanor. We have a cyber unit that handles cyber-related offenses, a white-collar unit. We have a gang and narcotics unit, and there's a lot of different divisions. So we have juvenile, felony review, and so on and so forth. So depending, to answer your question, depending on what unit you're in and what your job is, your day is going to be very different. So most of the attorneys, there's a court call that starts at 9 o'clock. So you're going to come to work, you're going to, get there and check your email and get your cases together and answer some phone calls, maybe meet with witnesses or meet with police officers. Then you're in court from 9 o'clock until right around noon, handling cases in court. You get a little bit of a lunch break where typically you're back in your office, you're answering phone calls, reading files, reading police reports. Then you're back in court at 1:30 for the afternoon court call, which goes typically till later in the afternoon, sometimes till 5 o'clock or even later, which means because so much time is spent in court, and our attorneys all love being in court, that's what draws them to this work. But when it comes to doing other jobs like returning phone calls and meeting with people and things like that, that all has to get done as well. So that's why it's not at all uncommon if you were to walk into my office on a Saturday or a Sunday morning, you're going to see people there working because they're really dedicated to their job. They all love what they do, just like I love what I do. They're all called to serve, which is why they choose this job versus other jobs in law that they could be doing, probably for a lot more money. But they really care about serving their community, and I'm lucky. I'm lucky to work with such a great staff of people. And I think prosecutors get a bad name sometimes in the media, and some of it is self-imposed. But I think a lot of people think prosecutors just sit in their office and figure out how they can send people to prison or how they can jam somebody up, and that's really not That's not what they're there for. They're there to help people, and that's all they want to do. So it's a great place to work. Love to have you back at some point, show you around. Things have changed a little bit, but it's a nice place.
People think of the prosecutors as one that encourage the victim to negotiate. And what do you call that? The
Plea bargain?
Plea bargain.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we hear that a lot, and in fact, when you look at the numbers, and this is nationwide, over 98% of criminal cases on average end up being resolved by way of plea.
Wow.
And even with those, we're still on trial a lot. There's a lot of trials going on any given day in the courthouse. What we encourage our attorneys to do is it kind of gets back to what we had said earlier in terms of seek justice. So you're going to sit down with your case, you're going to look at the facts of the case, you're going to look at the strength of the case, and it's not a question of whether the person did or didn't do it, because if it's gotten to the point where we've charged it, we've already pre-screened it, we've already worked with the police. There's a lot of cases that we pre-screen that never get charged because we've declined them and said, there's not sufficient evidence to charge this person.
Okay.
So by the time we've charged a case, it's because we believe two things. We believe the person that we've charged actually committed the crime, which is obviously very important. But we also, in addition to that, believe that we have sufficient evidence to prove that person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And unfortunately, there's a lot of times where we can meet part one of that test, where we believe we have the police caught the right person, but we have to decline charges because we don't believe there's sufficient evidence to charge the case. And those are difficult decisions that we make every day. But once we've charged that crime, we believe we have the right person and we can prove it. So then it becomes, what's right? What's the best outcome in this case? So what we'll typically do is we'll weigh the strengths, any trial risks we have. We'll listen to the victim in terms of what their wishes are in the case. Now, we don't always do what the victim wants us to do, because getting back to one of your questions earlier about what is justice to different people, well, in any case, justice is going to be different depending on who you ask in terms of all the players in that particular case. So the arresting officer might answer the question one way in terms of what he or she thinks justice is. The defendant is going to have an opinion on what he or she thinks justice is in that case. We have an idea of what we think the right thing is. The victim has an idea of what they think justice is, and that doesn't always line up. So, the victim may think this is appropriate, we may think this is appropriate. And ultimately, we don't represent the individual victims in a case, we represent the greater good, all of society. So there's, sometimes there's cases where the victim wants one thing and we think something else appropriate. We'll listen to the victim. We'll take into consideration what they think is best, but ultimately we have to make a call in terms of what we think is the appropriate outcome in the case. We'll communicate that to the defense attorney. There's a negotiation that happens in terms of what they think is appropriate, and most often we can come up with an agreement where we can present that to the court and the court accepts it in terms of a negotiated plea. But we don't force victims to plead guilty. I mean, if it's a case where, or to agree to having a plea of guilty, but if it's a case where, there's a minor crime committed and a victim wants the person to go to prison for 20 years and we think prison's not appropriate, we're gonna offer probation, or we may offer a diversion type program.
Yeah, what about that victim that cannot afford an attorney, to defend him?
Sure.
He may feel that he's not getting justice, or justice would be provided better if he had the money.
Absolutely, we hear that a lot. I can tell you the criminal justice system is from a victim's perspective, and most of us have been a victim of some type of crime in our lives at varying levels. It's incredibly frustrating for victims because they go to court. They've been brought into this whole system because somebody else has done something to them. So through no fault of their own, they've been thrust into this whole criminal justice system. And they go to court and they watch court and they hear the judge talk to the defendant and they hear all the rights that are being afforded to the defendant. And everybody in the court system is there to make sure that the defendant's rights are protected. And it should be that way, including our staff. But from a victim's perspective, if you're sitting in that courtroom and you're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't do anything wrong. This person harmed me. I'm here, and now everything's about them. When do I get to have my say? When is anybody going to ask me my thoughts? And it's very frustrating. There's terminology used by the judge that we don't expect them to know all these things. So we try to do a whole lot to empower victims. So I'm very proud of I was able to take over an office that has more victim witness coordinators, per capita than any other prosecutor's office certainly in Illinois, probably around the country. We have people in our office whose job it is to do nothing but help victims and answer those questions, coordinate with them, make sure that their voice is heard. We have volunteers that will come in and do things like, they may seem minor, but sit and have a cup of coffee with a victim while they're waiting for court. So there's a lot and the dog, the dogs are helpful as well. As I said before, not just for the victims, but maybe it's a family member. Maybe there's a murder trial going on and the family member, the parents of the victim are in our courthouse, in our office. Having somebody there for them, having the dogs there for them. Our sense and what I've found through the years is victims really just want to be heard.
Yeah.
We have a new program that we're able to bring back. We had it for a while, we lost it, and we were able to just bring it back. It's called victim offender mediation, and it's part of the whole concept of balance and restorative justice. We use it out in our juvenile facility, and it's just that. It's mediation where you have a trained mediator and you have the victim and the offender sitting together and both sides get to hear each other out. And it's not for every case, but the cases that we use it on, it's a very powerful tool. And it allows victims, and sometimes the only time, it allows victims the opportunity to actually be heard. And that's a very powerful thing. There's the Illinois legislature has done some things recently to help address this issue as well. We have the Crime Victims Bill of Rights, which provides some rights to victims. But to your point, what if you can't afford an attorney? Because we don't represent the victim. As I said, we represent everybody. And whereas,
justice for jury.
Right. When we go to court, when I went to court as a defense attorney, I represented my client, and that's it. When our prosecutors go to court, it's not as if it's the opposite of that. They represent everybody. And it's also our job to make sure the defendant's treated fairly, even if their own attorney doesn't speak up. So it becomes a complex issue.
You mentioned about walking me through the State's Attorney's Office. 4 times I've been there.
Yeah.
At least. One was with State's Attorney Dennis Ryan.
Okay, that's
Remember,
before my time.
You go way back in
Yeah.
the 70s, I guess, with Dennis Ryan. He invited me up there. Well, he and Mr. Ford, Edwin Ford, he's the president of the NAACP at that time. And Fred Foreman invited us there, and we had a round table discussion. Mike Waller, he invited us through the attorney Newsom.
Okay.
I guess Newsom.
Yeah.
He made an appointment for just to go out and talk, talk, and so forth. And now the 4th state's attorney is Michael Nerheim, and I really appreciate that the tour you gave me, and like you say, you invited me to again. Now, do you get around to giving lectures? I guess the students at either community college or high school.
Sure, we do a lot of that.
Okay.
Not only do I do that personally, but my staff actually enjoys going out and doing that as well. Gives them an opportunity to get out of the office, get out in the community, because prosecution work by its nature is kind of reactive in the sense that the crime's already occurred before we're involved, and we all like to try to prevent things from happening in the first place. So my staff loves to go out, talk, whether it's community groups, middle schools, high schools, philanthropic organizations, you name it. We're out there all the time. Our dog handler, Carol, who is Browser's handler, she loves to go to schools, work with kids, give demonstrations on cyber safety. We have a youth group that's part of our office, our youth advisory board, where we have middle school and high school students that are volunteer to be part of the state's attorney's office staff. They go out, they give presentations kind of peer-to-peer, which can be very powerful, whether it's on bullying, substance abuse, teen dating violence, internet safety, all those different types of issues, elder abuse, you name it. We're out there. Personally, I enjoy it myself. I speak at Woodland Middle School quite frequently to the 7th grade health classes. I speak to college students. I've spoken at our medical school to medical students. I think pretty much every Rotary and Exchange Club in Lake County.
Okay.
It's just really important, I think, to get out there, educate the community, and make sure that the folks out there know that we're there and what we do.
Tell me about identity theft. I know I invited one of your attorneys to come and speak to our group about that's a big, it's still a big thing.
It's a big issue. I mean, it gets bigger and bigger, and it has been for a while the one crime that most people are most likely to be victimized of, and it's pervasive, and these folks have gotten emboldened. They're pretty sneaky, whether it's them pretending to be the cable company, pretending to be the IRS, pretending to be federal law enforcement, you name it. And they prey on people's emotions, and they prey on people making that quick decision to give out some sort of information that they then use to harm people financially. And it's very destructive. And that's almost always outside information that we're relying on. And we can get that tunnel vision where we think, okay, I've read the evidence, I've looked at all the reports, and this is what happened. And we could be wrong. We could be focused on the wrong person. We could be focused on the wrong evidence, not necessarily even intentionally. It's just you're focused on this area. So that tunnel vision can be very dangerous, both whether you're a detective or a prosecutor. So the best way to combat that, I think, is to kind of step back and to bring fresh eyes on a case. People that don't have any preconceived ideas, that weren't necessarily involved in the initial investigation, and take a look and see, what are we missing? Is there some piece of evidence out there that everybody else missed because they were so focused on this? And that in doing that, we can uncover or at least give a much more broad perspective to an investigation. So I created the case review panel, which is something that's recognized around the country as a model. And what it essentially is a group of folks that don't rely on me for a paycheck. They're experienced from a lot of different areas, some retired judges, civil rights lawyers, civil attorneys. And their job is to look at cases where there is a question as to actual innocence, where there's new evidence that's come forward, take a look at that and see if there is something there that needs to be addressed. That's part of their job. The other part of their job is to, and by the way, all that then comes to me for me to make a decision. And I've had cases where I've exonerated people in my term here where the decision has been made, we got the wrong person. Whether that was 20 years ago or what have you, it's still my responsibility. And I have and will continue to, if those cases are brought to me and we see it, we're going to exonerate people that have been wrongfully convicted, because that's our job. It's our job to, that whole concept of seeking justice, that doesn't end once we get a conviction on somebody. If we find out 20 years later we were wrong, then we need to step up and make sure we're taking care of that.
Now, are there reparations for that person?
There can be. Certainly there, depending on whether there's civil liability, but that's the other problem with wrongful convictions. I mean, not only do you convict an innocent person, the guilty person has gone free, which is another problem. And lastly, they cost money, because the villages or the county or the different municipalities are going to have to pay for those lawsuits. And there's been expensive lawsuits here in Lake County where people have had to pay a lot of money for mistakes that were made in the past. But that can't stand in the way of freeing somebody. I mean, that can't be part of my thought process when I'm determining whether is this person innocent. I don't care whether, well, geez, yeah, they're innocent, but this could cost a lot of money. We got to do the right thing, and everything else will sort itself out.
Speaking of money, and the people that you come in contact with, are you responsible to? And so, by the way, I say responsible to, but you have the last word, right?
Well, usually, but not at home.
Yeah, except at home. But the state's attorney has so that means you have to be well equipped, well knowledgeable, and
well, you have to be able to rely on people to give you good information, and that's at the end of the day all you can do, and then you have to make that decision, and you have to stand by that decision and be accountable to the public for that decision. And I learned early on that I'm not here to make people happy. In fact, I upset people probably every day. But that's my job. I mean, I have to look at a case, I have to look at the facts and the law, and I have to make a decision. And I know every decision I make, some folks are going to like it and some folks aren't. But that's just the nature of what I got to do. And I had to tell my wife pretty early on that if I'm making everybody happy, then I'm not doing my job. So it can be tough sometimes, especially with social media, and people can say all kinds of things. But I try to drown that out and just make a decision and stand by it. And then if some information's presented to me later that I was wrong, can't be afraid to go back and revisit those decisions either. Which kind of leads me to the other purpose of the case review panel. Not only is it there to look backwards and address cases where there have been concerns, but the other part of their job is to look forward, to look at those cases, identify what went wrong, what mistakes were made, and then what policies and procedures and training can we put into place to make sure that doesn't happen anymore moving forward.
Fantastic. Along with that, speaking of money, you have to make a report to the county board, don't you? Especially during budget time.
So they do,
your budget has to be approved.
We have a budget that we live within, and
what type of budget you have?
It's about $14 million is our budget now. I try to run my office like I run my own. They say you should spend the people's money like it's your own.
Yeah.
But I guess that could cut both ways. If you're responsible, you spend it like it's your own, and that we don't waste money. We're very frugal in our office. I recognize that every penny that's given to me by the county, those are taxpayer dollars, and I pay taxes too. So I'm sensitive to that. I'm proud of my record. Ever since I've been in office, I've come in under budget every year. So every year, I end up giving money back to the county that we don't spend.
That's rare.
We pinch pennies. We've cut out publications that we don't necessarily need. We've cut out subscriptions, and we don't necessarily need books in every office. Maybe one set on every floor. And if phones aren't being used, we get rid of them. So we're a lot of little things like that we do to try to make sure we're living within our means. The county's been good about supporting our mission. They're tough, and I think that's one of the reasons why Lake County is one of the only counties left in Illinois with such a good credit rating, considering the financial situation that this state is in. That can be a challenge sometimes, though, because there are things that we need that the county's not always willing to provide, because they're rightfully so. They're tight with their money. So that budget cycle, that budget fight is always a challenge, but it's. I appreciate the position the county's in, and as a taxpayer, I'm glad the way they are. It's just
now the county board. They have their own attorney then, or you the.
I'm the attorney for.
You're the attorney for the county. Okay.
So I represent the county board in the county as a whole. I don't represent individual board members, but it's the interest of the county, and then again all the different county elected officials.
Attorney Nerheim, you mentioned about a case review panel members. These are experienced people. You mentioned judges and so forth, retired judges, whatever. What about, you also had another challenge. You started the first citizen panel review board.
Yeah, so I got two different boards, and they're both hard on me, but it's important. So the case review panel is, again, those are attorneys that are there to look at old cases and then also discuss ways to prevent wrongful convictions from happening in the future. The Citizens Advisory Board is a group of people, community leaders, community activists, faith leaders from around Lake County that meet with me periodically, mostly from communities of color in Lake County, that meet with me. In fact, we have a meeting next week where we sit in my office and we discuss issues. And it's important because it gives me perspective that I probably wouldn't otherwise have on different areas. And it gives, most importantly, people in those communities quite literally a seat at the table in my office where issues can be brought to my attention or perspectives can be brought to my attention that I might not otherwise see. And Pastor Caples from Jesus Name, for example,
great person. Yeah,
he's on my panel, and he's one of those people that's not afraid to challenge me and say, hey, you may think this is the case, but I can tell you this is what people see, and this is what people perceive, and that's important for me to know. So it's been very healthy, I think, for both the panel members and certainly for myself and the community, and it's just been a great thing.
Basically, you're highly interested in making Lake County what a safe place to live, work, and raise a family, right?
That's what I'm trying to do.
Make people want to come
right
to Lake County.
It's a great county. I mean, it really is. When you look at all we have here and the diversity, Lake County is one of the most diverse counties you can imagine in every respect, if you think about it. We have every type of community you can imagine, demographically, but also in terms of we have rural communities, we have urban communities, we have the beautiful lakeshore. We have a great, just a great diverse community here that hopefully more people will come and decide to raise their families in. It's safe overall. Now, it's not to say we don't have our challenges. We certainly do, and that's not something I turn a blind eye to. That's one of the things that keeps me up at night is some of the communities where we see higher rates of crime and higher rates of violent crime. So we definitely have a long way to go in terms of getting our community as safe as it can possibly be. But when you compare us to most other communities of our size, we're a relatively safe community, and we're doing pretty well. But like I said, we can't rest on that. We have a long way to go.
Has that been a challenge? I know it has been a challenge for me coming into Lake County over 50 years ago, and it's still a challenge, is the ethnic employment situation. Is there a challenge for you to have more assistant attorneys in a minority group?
Sure, it's a challenge.
And see, now it's not just African American; it's Hispanic attorneys too. This type of thing.
Well, we have a rich population here. I mean, we're lucky to have the diversity that we have, especially when you look at communities like Waukegan or Mundelein or Round Lake.
Yeah.
The challenge is because of a lot of distrust, and that's, again, this perception reality thing, but the perception is there where there is, for a lot of reasons, and some of it's deserved, there is a distrust between the minority communities and law enforcement. And that makes it difficult to attract people to want to be prosecutors or want to be police officers. And it's hard to, when we have openings for assistant state's attorney positions, we get very few minority applications. Now, back in the day, you would just say, well, hey, I have an opening, I opened it up to everybody, I didn't get any applications, so that's why my office is all a bunch of white males.
Okay.
And we can't think that way, and we can't operate that way. We have to be much more open to going out and recruiting and trying to motivate people, particularly people from Lake County and from our communities, to want to be prosecutors and to want to work in the state's attorney's office. So there's a lot of different ways that we do that, and some of it's pretty far upstream. Some of our programs, we have a program called Knowledge is Power that really starts with high school kids and even earlier, where we bring those youth in from the community, from Lake County.
Yeah.
They get an opportunity to experience the office and see what it's like to be a prosecutor. Our hope is that through those experiences, some of those young people are going to say, you know what, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to be the state's attorney, or I'm going to be a public defender, or I'm going to be a judge, or I'm going to be a detective. And then hopefully start that career path, start with motivating and inspiring those people. We follow that up with programs we have with high school students, with internship programs. Then we follow it up with our engagement in the community, engagement with college and law school students. And then finally we have an internship program where we bring in every summer, and we just had a bunch start on Monday, or Tuesday rather, in our office, where we bring in college and law students, which is how I got my start in this office, from all over, to give them a summer's worth of an experience and hopefully inspire them to then become interested in becoming prosecutors. And what we're starting to see is now when I have those openings, I'm getting more and more of a diverse pool of candidates, which has allowed me in my hires, when you look at the numbers of women and minorities that I've hired, I've been able to hire more and more, which has been great because I know you talked to me about this from day one, about which is very important, improving the overall diversity of the Lake County State's Attorney's Office because, as I just said a few moments ago, we're lucky to have such a diverse community, but the office should reflect the community as well.
I mentioned this, and I mentioned to you before, and for our listening audience sake too, when I first came, I mentioned Attorney Dennis Ryan, and I mentioned to him about the lack of African-American assistant state's attorneys. He said, Brooks, if you find me one, I'll hire him. Well, I prayed about it, and it just so happens that I was in Chicago. It's the Metropolitan Open Communities. I forgot the name of the organization. Metropolitan Open Communities. They at a luncheon, and I met a Lonnie Randolph. I never forget the name. See, way back in the early '50s there, and I asked him about it. He said, "Well, I live in, I think it was South Bend, Indiana. So he commuted. Well, but first of all, Dennis Ryan hired him.
Yeah, that's quite a commute.
And he said, Brooks, I said, I understand what you're trying to do, but I'm 1 year I've given you, but I can't commute anymore. But he was elevated to a judge.
Sure.
So you never know what's going to happen. Oh, the next one is Fred Foreman. Fred Foreman said the same thing. Because when Lonnie Randolph left, there was no African American. He said, find me one, I'll hire him. So I found him a female. Yeah. He hired the female, But the female went into private practice. Michael Waller, I'm sure he had, because there was somebody there when you were there, right? When you first came in. I forgot the name of, but he did hire someone. And you've had several.
Like I said, I've tried very hard to improve the overall diversity of the office, which, it's not just a catchphrase, it's really important.
Yeah,
right. It's especially when you're talking about kind of rebuilding that trust, and it's important to the community that they trust what we do. I mean, it's vital that they trust what we do, and every bit of that helps do that. So it's been a challenge, but because of kind of our long-term plan, and especially with engaging young people and college and law students, it's made it a lot easier to attract people. And I'm lucky because I get 50 applications for every opening I have, so I'm able to pick the best and the brightest to come work here as prosecutors, which ultimately benefits the people of Lake County because those people are there and they're really good at what they do.
Now, one barrier may be salary too, right? Everyone in the country is competing for, so there's a premium.
Salary is a barrier. I mean, our attorneys start at not a whole lot of money. I mean, it's a nice salary compared to what most people make, but it's when you consider the law school debt that they have, and it's not a whole lot of money, but there's ability to work there for a while. There's some upward mobility.
You have quite a bit of turnover, don't you?
We don't have a whole lot of turnover, which is good and bad. I mean, it's good in the sense that generally, it used to be a lot of turnover. It used to be where people would come in, they'd work for a couple of years, get that experience, and then they'd leave.
Okay.
Now people come and they're generally going to stay for a good period of their career. A lot of people will stay for their whole career, which is great because the end result of that is we have great career prosecutors that are excellent, very experienced, really good at what they do. The only downside to that is there's not a lot of movement and not a lot of turnover, so people can kind of get bogged down in different divisions because there's not a lot of movement, and that's just a challenge for me to try to overcome, to keep people fresh, keep them motivated, even though there's not a lot of turnover. So it kind of goes both ways, but we're lucky to have the applicants that we get, and people, again, they could all make more money in the private sector.
Oh yeah.
But they come here because it's not all about the money for them. It's about the ability to serve, and for some people that still means something. It's about the ability to have a nice work-life balance. the ability to go home and feel good about what you did that day. We have a woman in our office who had a very successful private practice, made a lot of money. She wanted to work in our office, and I said, well, why would you want to come here and take a huge pay cut? And she said, because I want to feel good about what I do again. And you know, that says a lot about her, but that's just, I mean, that's kind of the type of people we have, which is, again,
Speaking of females, I can end this program without mentioning Cynthia Vargas.
Yeah, she's great.
Communications manager in the Lake County State's Attorney's Office. She's a great person. Without her, this program probably wouldn't be. She made all the arrangements. So that's the type of person that you're looking for. She's not just a minority person, but she's a great person.
She's wonderful. I mean, she's literally the first person I hired when I got elected.
Do you just happen to be Hispanic, I guess?
I had met her in the community through the different community events I'd been to, and I knew I wanted to have a communications manager. Our office never had a communications person, believe it or not. So that was one of the first positions I needed to create, and I thought she would be great at it. She didn't really have any experience with the media, but it didn't matter because she cared about the mission. She's a passionate person, and all that other stuff you can learn. So she's been huge. And some of the programs I mentioned, like specifically the Knowledge is Power program, that was her brainchild. I mean, she came up with the idea, she implemented it, and she's been terrific. Your
ultimate goal, then, I know you mentioned a couple of times that you were elected in 2012, re-elected in 16, right?
Yeah.
And you're topped on the list for 2020. right.
I don't know if
So
I'm top on the list, but
what's your ultimate goal?
I don't know.
It's kind of early.
It's early. I'm pretty young. I can tell you this: there's no job that I would rather do than the one I'm doing right now, and that's how I feel today. So I don't know how I'll feel tomorrow, but that's how I feel today.
Well, the feelings of the citizens have been watching the program is great. I want to thank you very much, Attorney New. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Attorney Michael Nerheim, Lake County State's Attorney, and he's been giving us an update on the Lake County State's Attorney's Office, and we continually feel that he is a person that you should know. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Community Forum. My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.